Windsor, Ontario, the southernmost city in Canada. It shares the busiest international trade border crossing in North America with Detroit, Michigan. More than 25% of all merchandise traded between the United States and Canada crosses the Ambassador Bridge.
When I think of Windsor, I think of a small, cozy city.
Probably a cliche answer, but roses.
Windsor's nickname is the Rose City or the City of Roses. It has several large parks and gardens on the waterfront and neighbors Point Pelee National Park. However, Windsor's environmental movement may be lagging behind other cities of its size.
Actually, I really love the path along the waterfront. That's really nice. I think we could use probably more parks in Windsor.
Curbside residential audits by the Windsor-Essex Solid Waste Authority revealed that 50% of residents' garbage is food waste. Windsor's air quality ranks among the worst in Ontario.
I think in Canada, people probably think about manufacturing jobs, obviously automotive industry.
I think that means that we are more industrial. We have a lot more factories.
I think of a lot of manufacturing jobs.
Windsor's industrial and manufacturing heritage is responsible for how the city has developed. It is known as the automotive capital of Canada and is a major contributor to the automotive industry.
You know, that's a very interesting question in terms of the automotive city. And to be honest, I'm not sure that the two are mutually exclusive. I think maybe what you're referring to is sort of the idea is we're a car town. So because we're a car town, we cannot have bicycling or walking or public transportation. Not at all. I mean, many cities have made this transition and they still have very successful manufacturing bases, right? So I really think it's a matter of choice and also a matter of perspective.
We know Windsor's economy is driven by the automotive industry, which heavily influences the city's policies. But how big of a role does the manufacturing mindset really play? Locals and city officials alike say they want to make changes to become more of a green city, just as every community should. But is Windsor actually making the moves to become an environmentally engaged city?
I would say Windsor's come a long way in the last 10 years. We have three plans now that deal directly with environmental conditions. So we have our environmental master plan. And the other thing that Windsor's doing that is pretty unique across Canada is we've already started to embed our environmental decisions into our asset management framework. So again, when we're looking at capital projects, asking those questions on the environment, like will this be sustainable for the environment?
Well, nowadays I think there is a growing consensus that climate change is our primary global environmental threat right now. And that is because, first of all, climate change affects so many areas of the environment, such as water, air quality, so pollution, but also food security. So all those issues are related to climate change. But also because exactly it's a global problem that requires a global solution.
So if you ask the general public, the number one issue that the public feels is air quality. And part of that is just our cross-border air pollution with Michigan. And obviously we have no jurisdictional control over air quality coming from the States, or even as a municipality, we can't control emissions from industry. That's a provincial or a federal entity, so that is outside of our control.
The local government has made changes to moderate the city's contribution to air pollution. A 2001 bylaw deems it illegal to idle your car or boat for longer than 5 minutes within city limits. The city has also integrated 29 hybrid buses to reduce non-renewable fuel consumption.
Because the city of Windsor is considered a car town, a car city, I think it's been a little bit of a challenge to change the mentality and think about the need or the importance of planting more trees, for example, and creating more livable areas.
So, what does it mean to be a more livable city? According to local governments for sustainability, the definition of a green or sustainable city is:
sustainable cities work towards an environmentally, socially, and economically healthy and resilient habitat for existing populations without compromising the ability of future generations to experience the same.
Other cities of similar size, population, and geography have taken steps toward becoming more sustainable.
In a comparison of the cities of London, St. Catharines, and Windsor, we found that while they may be similar in size, they vary in waste management operations. Garbage collection in all three cities occurs on a weekly basis, but this isn't the case for the more eco-friendly means of waste disposal. Both London and St. Catharines pick up recycling weekly as well, but this is where Windsor begins to fall behind. Neither Windsor nor London offer organized compost collection. Without the proper infrastructure for solid waste disposal, pollution will only get worse. For Windsor, the first step to becoming a more sustainable area could mean starting from the bottom up.
Kind of more in the micro level, I would say, is probably our waste. We generate a lot of waste as a community, and you can look at like little everyday things of, disposable straws or cutlery. Like those little things can actually add to a big problem when you look at a community-wide.
Not only compost, but just agricultural waste is also a big impact. So I think as long as we get that initiative, because if you look at larger cities, like say Toronto and Ottawa, they already have the composting program in place.
When it comes to recycling, you've probably talked to people from the city. We don't recycle organic waste. And I think that's one big limitation of our recycling program. And I hope that that's going to change soon. Certainly the province is putting pressure on all the municipalities to provide organic waste management programs.
Sounds easy, right? But there are big barriers to making these changes, including cost.
A lot of air quality particularly comes across from the States. So being in Windsor, you can't really have a really big say on what the US is doing. But for composting, it's at least a smaller issue that can be fixed locally and on like a smaller scale, but it is still that cost factor.
And there's no doubt that the cost of recycling is expensive, but so is the cost of operating the landfills. Now that we're moving in the direction where the province will be mandating it, then it'll be incumbent upon us to find the funds to make sure that we're doing it in the most effective, efficient way possible. Once we provide that mechanism to take sort of the stinky stuff, the rotting food out of your garbage, then we can move to the next step, which is saying, you know what, let's have regular garbage collection every other week and collect recyclables every week. And so this is another step in the evolution of garbage and recycling collection. And I think overall it's a positive step.
Environmental infrastructure provides a foundation for how a city manages tasks like recycling, energy conservation, and reducing our carbon footprint.
In my opinion, the City of Windsor's environmental infrastructure is actually pretty good. If we're talking about things like wastewater treatment, water collection and so forth, and basic roads and so forth, I think the infrastructure in Windsor is pretty good. And there's a lot of things that can go behind what sustainability means. We're talking everywhere from basic infrastructure service, in terms of fulfilling its function, all the way to, say, healthy and green cities.
Infrastructure is the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities needed for the operation of a society. When it comes to the environment, this means the structures that provide a city with water supply, waste disposal, and pollution control services.
Infrastructure is implemented through policy. We met with local MP Brian Massey to discuss the importance of having these environmental policies in Windsor.
So today, we don't have the same type of footprint that we had in the past, but it's working its way there again, slowly but surely. With greater public policy, it actually offers probably one of the best, not only opportunities for making a city more livable, but also making our city more attractive for investment as well. It's somewhat trying to become a green city. There have been great initiatives in pockets. I don't think it's reached its full potential in terms of that movement. There's wonderful organizations and groups that have been working there over decades to make it a highlight and to make it more available to, I guess, the longer-term vision for sustainability, but it's still getting there.
The fact that Windsor is a border city, in fact, has a lot of implications for environmental law. It cannot be addressed only through Canadian environmental regulations.
A big challenge for Windsor and other cities like Windsor is two fronts. First is that idea of renewability. All right, Windsor has picked up in terms of what we call, say, brownfields renewals, in other words, redevelopment of maybe areas that have been abandoned or basically left, or just changeovers. For example, all the manufacturing that has now maybe converted to other alternatives.
The City of Windsor has identified approximately 564 acres of potential brownfields. Property owners may be eligible for incentives if their land requires cleanup in order to be redeveloped. Building on abandoned property has economic, social, and environmental benefits, such as creating jobs, offering more housing options, and reducing residents' expansion into natural and ecological areas.
And then lastly, I would just say that overall is the general thought that the economy is not hurt by a strong environmental drive. In fact, I would argue for our future, it is the single most important economic derivative that we need to improve is the environment. Fresh water, fresh food, clean, healthy, sustainable living will even improve our overall quality of life and reduce our health costs. So these are reasons to do it outside of just the general I guess, argument of having an environmentally friendly way of lifestyle.
If you look at cancer rates amongst people in Windsor, they're a lot higher than in other places in the country. And I don't think that enough people really realize that the environment has a lot to do with, you know, basically cancer rates.
I don't know much about it, to be honest. I don't think we're doing great things for the environment.
I love the riverfront. It's just great to go for a bike ride or a walk.
I think the environmental initiatives are, you know, pretty good. I do like the idea of the green space, the idea that we're kind of preserving parts of the city where we've got like wildlife.
I know when the issue with the bees first happened, I know there was a lot of talk about planting a lot of like wildflowers and stuff like that. So in my neighborhood, that actually did start to kick up a little bit. So we saw more like wildflowers growing around our neighborhood. So I know they're taking steps, but you can always improve.
We do have kind of a rare climate for Ontario in terms of growing a lot of crops, winter wheat, tomatoes, those kinds of things come to mind. I mean, the unfortunate consequence is that, you know, we really don't have any of the natural landscape that, you know, would have covered our area even like 150 years ago.
The thing that I noticed was, where I'm from, we have a compost program, so it gets picked up with recycling and garbage, and we don't have that here. So I noticed that a lot because I'm not used to throwing certain things in the garbage, because at home I throw it in the compost.
Not a lot of infrastructure.
There's garbage everywhere all over the city.
It is difficult to measure the impact of these policies, but that doesn't mean they aren't worthwhile.
I mean, we hear a lot in the news these days about, for example, active transportation, biking and so forth. And traditional infrastructure, especially when I was a civil engineer, go back about 20 years in terms of design, it wasn't designed for that kind of thinking, although perhaps it should have been. It's easy on one hand to say we want all sorts of elaborate, extremely cutting-edge technologies, but they do cost money, and they do also require certain demands and criteria that maybe were not traditionally planned.
I don't think Windsor has been anywhere near the cutting edge it should be, and so I think it's just been the fact that we haven't really galvanized the political will to make those bold investment decisions. Say, for example, the auto industry, where it's turning into a more of a green footprint for it. I launched with Joe Comartin and Jack Layton and as well David Suzuki the first national green auto strategy back in 2004. So that's over a decade ago. We were talking about having a national green auto strategy. It never came to fruition, but you know, right now I think is starting to come to realize that that value-added high-tech greening of the auto industry is where all the money is now. The concept was there, the drive was there, now it's about picking up the pieces and reclaiming our spot.
So we have seen more and more initiatives that are led by corporations, that are led by groups of investors. And I think that those initiatives, although they are not officially international law, they are essential. Corporations, they are investing more in green energy, for example, and they have been essential. New corporate sectors, they are solar, for example.
I think a lot of the issues are mostly from factories, so I don't know what we could do for that.
It's of the people of Windsor and the companies that work in Windsor to try and make sure that Windsor is a cleaner, healthier place.
I would like to see some improvement.
Well, from the looks of it, they're trying to do good things.
There needs to be a bit more transparency with what goes on with the recycling process.
I mean, I can't say that I'm aware of any significant efforts to improve our environment.
Just like, what is the end goal of doing things like recycling?
Of course, there's always room for improvement when it comes to things like the environment, and the environment is the well-being of your people, right?
I feel like they should improve it before it gets worse. Like in 10 years, it should be better than it is now.
I think there's a greater general awareness among the public about the problems that our ecosystems face and the the benefits, both social and economic.
I'm a bit optimistic as to Windsor's environmental policy, honestly.
Policy is nothing without action, and environmental change begins at the community level. But this, too, does not come without challenges.
I think there's a misconception of what it means to be green, that it automatically is going to be a higher cost. It's going to, by going green, we're going to impact the economy, or we're going to, impact the social.
Everyone is very interested in going more environmentally friendly. The issue is that, which really comes down to, is that cost, and if that company is actually willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is. So with the increase in minimum wage, environmentally being conscious actually took a back seat to that.
And sometimes it's a challenge because, obviously this may not be the concern of, a vast majority of the population. So can we bring it to where they are? So another thing we're looking at doing this year is partnering for Emergency Preparedness Week. So to transform our climate change adaptation message into an emergency response message. So let's talk about weather. So instead of talking about climate, let's talk about weather. How are you going to, the next flood, what will you do? Or how will you be prepared for the next flood? So we're trying to change our messaging too, so it relates better to the average citizen.
It's easy for us to say, well, we want this, we want that, but there has to be a balance of expectations, because often developing one aspect in a city in terms of how you live or so forth is going to mean that you might be, temporarily at least, taking away from something else. So you need to balance these expectations, and people don't realize that their own responsibility of what's involved.
Recognizing the environmental repercussions of our actions as a single-use society will go a long way to balance these expectations and create true change. Being actively engaged and educated about environmental initiatives is another important element of sustainability.
Because there are sort of limits to what an individual can do. So information challenges, when you talk about what are the challenges facing a city, information is a challenge. And sometimes information is in fact already there, but it's how do you process and analyze information. I know the city, for example, has environmental master plans and sustainability plans. I think actually following those plans will probably take you a long way. It may sound a little bit trite in some ways, but the challenges that are facing Windsor are actually similar to many challenges that many cities in Canada are facing. It's not a case of just fixing the infrastructure, it's how we manage it.
Our environmental master plan has 5 goals: improve our air quality, improve our water quality, responsible land use, use resources efficiently, and promoting awareness. Even on top of that, the city wants to be seen as a leader. We want to be seen as doing the right thing. And hopefully if we do that, then everybody else will kind of follow along and say, they can do it, we can do it. So we're trying to make it a real community achievement and to build in this understanding, because we need the community to speak on the behalf of the environment in order to change the elected officials' minds.
The Windsor-Essex Solid Waste Authority's operating budget for 2018 was $23.8 million. Windsor locals can help reduce these costs by donating old clothing, avoiding disposable items, and shopping with reusable grocery bags.
We have this gap where we have people who are aware of some of the issues, but then we still have people that don't even recycle, will actually just throw everything in the garbage. And I think we need to work on educating more than taking an environmental, we need to plant more trees, because until everyone kind of gets a better understanding, just more awareness of environmental issues and how to, if we see something, how to report it.
Misconceptions about the cost of living more sustainably and being environmentally friendly may discourage individuals from doing their part.
Well, when you grow organic food, it's very labor intensive. And that's why when we buy organic food in the stores, it's, a lot of people think that it would cost them more. But when you grow it yourself, you're not calculating the cost of your labor because it's something that you enjoy doing.
In 2015, the average Windsor household sent 1,322 pounds of waste to landfills. However, grassroots initiatives like Bridget's New Roots show us that just one person can really make a difference.
Specifically coming from Windsor, other than Malden Park, that's our main park we run around, there isn't really that much parkland. So I wanted to do more about giving back to the community and creating more green spaces. New Roots was a startup company that I pursued through the Epicenter, and the main reason why I started it was actually because of University of Windsor and trying to come up with a solution to our large waste management issues. So what we do is we would collect the waste and then turn it into compost, and then from there we donate it to community garden.
There was a number of community initiatives. For example, your community gardens and all that sort of, those sorts of efforts. They serve as good demonstration projects. The one thing to be careful of with things like demonstration projects is people assume them to be the truth, right? If it worked in one place, it will obviously work somewhere else. That isn't necessarily the case, and that's the whole point of why we do research. But the important thing to take from this is the fact that because it can work, it then leads to the consideration of how can we actually make it work on a large-scale context.
It's really important to educate people and advocate for urban agriculture or community-supported agriculture as well. Supporting farmers' markets, that's very important as well. Riverside cleanup is very important because a lot of stuff that's thrown out by people ends up in the water, and we pollute the waters and we pollute fish. And recycling, a lot of people don't recycle, especially when they're not at home. So a lot more needs to be done by the city to educate people to do it, but also by everyone to pitch in and do their job.
Well, I do my recycling.
Maybe I wouldn't drive as much.
Bring awareness probably, and like groups maybe together, because like we don't have like many.
Definitely, I think that the individual needs to take a more of their own stance on things.
Even though it's very limited what we can do, you know, I've said this many times that basically, you know, you could recycle your entire life and it won't make up for one day of pollution in China.
There's clearly a relationship between capitalism and environmental destruction.
It's kind of everyone doing their own bit as opposed to hoping that the municipal government does it for them.
I think that if people want to make these changes, they should tell the government and the local government that that's something they want, and at the same time the government should be putting an effort into making these changes.
To be honest, I'd really like to see Ojibwe Park expanded. It's the only area, you know, within driving distance that you can get, you know, proper natural experience.
If you truly do want to have a clean conscience when it comes to the environment, recycling is something that people should do all the time, and like you said, composting as well.
I don't think you could be complacent about it. I don't think you can just sit back and just be like, oh, the environment will kind of take care of itself. That's not really how it works. It's kind of a double-edged sword. It's a two-way street. So if the environment's going to take care of us and give us a place to live, we kind of have to give back and take care of it. So you're going to have to make changes. You can't just stay stagnant and just leave it the way it is.
I think, to tell you the truth, it starts small. And there are the larger things. One of the things, even myself as an individual, outside of my profession, I ask myself is can I contribute? And it really is the smaller things that make a difference.
So I don't think we're ever going to be done. I think we're going to get to a point where it is more systematically embedded in everything we do. So there's not going to be a lot of the pilot projects or the big plan developments. I think that's going to be phased out, but I don't think you're ever going to say we're done.